little bit after 7:30, so I'd like to say hello. I'm Coco, one of the co-founders for Startup Lady. Thank you so much for being with us Tuesday evening. I know that everyone's really busy nowadays, so I hope that this will be valuable as well as fun and relaxing for you while you just like enjoy. And please make sure to, chat any questions you might have because I'm gonna do my best to try and ask our special guest this evening. And just a little background about like who we are at Startup Lady is we're bringing gender equality to the startup community. We're fostering a safe space and a community for women and non-binary individuals so they can find, start, and grow their own businesses with inspiration, education, and support. We're organizing these lives today because we really want to bring value to our community during these really difficult times. So please, feel free to chat any questions as I'd like to introduce our special guest, who is the co-founder and CEO of Zehitomo, Japan's premier marketplace for local services from photographers to plumbers to personal trainers. Zehitomo empowers small businesses and freelancers that conduct their businesses offline. So please welcome our special guest this evening, Jordan Fisher. Thank you for being with us this evening.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, I'm glad. I know that you're very busy now and it must be a very busy time. So I just like to start us off really quickly. I know that I've been a little bit confused and I know that a lot of people have actually asked me about this, but there's a lot of confusion about the gig economy, freelancers, and shared economy. Can you shed some light on this for us?
No, great way to open up. And I think that, these words are often used interchangeably by both people in the media, people in the industries. And, I think the origins of, some of the different words, have overlapping purposes. But when you're talking about the gig economy, it's generally like a gig is a one-off job, right? And that could be an Uber driver taking you from point A to B, but it could also be a band playing at a wedding. Right. And so when you look at the spectrum of whether this be, a job that could be replaced by AI or, electronic vehicles in the next 10 years, or something that is a relatively high skilled job with much higher kind of payout, I think it just kind of revolves on very different economies and very different skill sets and very different marketplaces to support that. So I think, at Zechitomo, we're really a platform for, high skilled professionals. That said, there's a lot of gig work. It's a lot of one-off jobs. If you need to have, your plumbing fixed, right? If you need a photographer for your wedding, those are gigs. But they're not in the same that you would have, somebody, doing shopping for you or taking you around somewhere in the more kind of C2C transactional jobs. So that's the gig economy. Freelancing, I think everybody maybe understands is, not as a company, but as an individual, you're doing work. And fortunately for Japan, the last several years, Japan has woken up to the fact that, its productivity is worst among G7, right? The majority of its, businesses are SMBs that contribute to the economy, and it's mostly services that are contributing to Japan's economy. Yet, given how low productivity is, given that there's a declining population and productive workforce, you're starting to see all these different initiatives to encourage, women to rejoin the workforce, to encourage people to work second jobs, fukugyo, and making that okay. And so I think there's a lot of different types of freelancers, from people who are working second jobs to people doing it as a little bit, something on the side, to people who are doing that as their primary profession. And so you also have a spectrum in there from kind of the higher to the low end. And then the last one was the sharing economy, I think you said, right? So the sharing economy is, I guess, as the word says, it's really some shared resource. So you're sharing a house, you're sharing a car, you're sharing, maybe some special tools or some skill set. And so you could have a freelancer in the sharing economy doing a gig perhaps, right? And these things can be overlapping. But I think to me, the most important thing is just that if you see a media article or if someone says, oh, this is how you can become a freelancer or make money in the gig economy, they, depending on what type of job it is and depending on your interests and passions, it can be just so very different amongst that spectrum. And there's very high-end work and there's also very kind of entry-level work in all three of those.
Okay. And can you like there was a question from someone in our team, Sabrina. She was wondering like what kinds of side gigs are people doing right now on Zehitomo?
Yeah. So on Zechtamo is actually not so much a platform for side gigs. It's actually mostly for people's primary gigs. And this is, so you're talking about like a professional photographer, right? The professional personal trainer, people who are doing this as their primary means to live. And right now with Corona, it's been really interesting. We've seen some different trends, different things happen as there's a state of emergency and people are at home. I'm also aware of kind of how things were moving in other different countries where you had more intense lockdowns, where obviously some services became illegal and whatnot. But what we saw in Japan was that there was actually, naturally, there was a slight decline in services where you're like you're going to a yoga studio or you're going to a dance studio, right, to learn dance or something like that. But we then saw an increase on the flip side of that of people looking for online lessons, right? People starting off yoga online. At Zechtem, actually, we had a yoga teacher this morning do kind of an internal session for us. And it's really nice I think from your home, a lot of people are experiencing something that they haven't ever been able to experience before. And I think some of those trends are going to continue to stay with us. The future of the gym or the dance line, I think, is never really going to be the same. We're going to have this, some sort of working hybrid. And then we also saw, different, more people spending time at home. And so an increase in demand for home services, right? So if you're going to be at home every day and working, then maybe you actually want to fix that thing that's always been bothering you, right? Or you want to clean your aircon because now it's on that much more of the day or whatever it may be. And so overall, we see that, there's a slight dip, in the majority of services, but we also saw a large increase in a handful of services throughout the period in Corona. And for us being a horizontal marketplace and covering hundreds of categories, it was pretty interesting to see, where things changed. And this week now with the emergency being lifted, also kind of closely watching how consumer demand, we're going to have pent up demand. We're also going to have things that become new types of demand change and evolve over the coming weeks.
And I know you kind of mentioned it right now, but can you share a little bit of the differences between like how the trends that you saw before to right now, given the coronavirus?
Yeah. So a lot of teachers. So we had a lot of requests on Zechtemore for lessons and wellness, right? Looking for a personal trainer, looking for a yoga teacher, a piano teacher, an English teacher. And some of those are harder to do remote than others. But we've seen a lot of our teachers start doing remote classes, right? And we've seen a lot of demand explicitly looking for remote classes. And so I think in the lessons in wellness, that's probably, I'm sure most people who've been online, have kind of seen either some ads for different services being offered remotely or whatnot. But I think that that's been definitely one trend that to some extent will stay. I think people that have experienced, oh, in my home, I can get this great workout without going to the gym. I don't think that's going to go back down to the levels that it were before, which is close to zero. I also don't think that the gym is necessarily going to go away entirely, right? And people are talking about what does the future gym look like, right? What do future lessons look like? Is it going to be some hybrid where maybe you have less people in a class, but also some people attending the class remotely, right? And I think for some things that's easier, but also, yeah, if you're getting a personal training session, the trainer can't actually physically support you, right? They can't actually touch your body and kind of, have you kind of experience their breathing as well. And so, you can't go to the same extreme in every vertical, but yeah, I mean, things that can happen online are definitely, definitely a huge increase there across the board.
So are there any services that you use yourself on Zekitomo?
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned, we had a yoga lesson this morning, which was great because I have bad posture and bad exercise behaviors even before the break, the lockdown. So, yeah, I think it was nice. We had a handful of Zechtoma members and a really great yoga instructor that came on, and we did a session together. Other times in our home, like if we needed to do some electrical work, or if we needed to, I think when we were moving or other different needs, or at the office, before the lockdown, we need to take some new team photos. We called in a photographer. We have an event, we can call in a caterer. We saw a big increase in, for example, like personal chef, right? People looking for people to come in, since you're not going to go out to a restaurant to do something, maybe to somebody to come to your home for something smaller, more special for your family. And so I think, we have a little benefit for Zechtomo employees where everybody can use up to 1,000,000, like 10,000 yen a month on a Zechtomo service, right? So we can always be kind of experimenting and learning and in kind of, using our own product. But I think it's just, there's so many really talented professionals all across Japan, both freelancers and small businesses. And the big challenge that we have is that it's really hard to find who's the right yoga teacher for me right now, right? How much is it going to cost to do this electrical work, right? And who's the right person for that? And so we're just trying to make it easier for both sides to connect with each other. And I think what's really hard in talking about trends is that the last 20 years, if you were to look at any survey of SMBs across Japan and say, what are their pain points been? It's always been shukyaku, right? Getting new clients. And how do you grow your business? And I think, compared to the US or other countries, I think in Japan, Japan has long been a country of artisans, right? Really talented people, but haven't been as aggressive in terms of growing their business necessarily, right? Focusing on the quality over the quantity and whatnot. But the flip side of that is that it's been harder for some of these businesses to kind of evolve and grow their customer base, even if they're offering a really great service. And so that's the thing that continues to kind of blow my mind every day is these professionals offer really amazing services. And if you have an experience with them, it's amazing. Yet it's so hard to find these professionals otherwise. And for the professionals, it's so hard for them to find clients otherwise, customers. And so that's what we're really trying to solve.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm glad that you're able to provide a platform for people to find each other. I think that's honestly one of the struggles, and definitely right now, given that we had been choosing to stay home.
Yeah.
But what are some of the unusual like jobs or services that you've come across on your platform?
Unusual. I mean, people have needs for everything, right? I mean, during Corona, we also saw like a boost in people looking for a dog therapist, right? Maybe they're spending more time at home with their pets, right? Into this, and so I think, we've had that. We also had, you look at people looking for. This was before Corona, but a lot of people looking for a karaoke teacher, right? Voice instructor. It was
Wow.
really stressful for a lot of people to go to these Bonenkai thing. I know that, right? And you have really talented voice trainers all across Japan, right? And so, I think that there's, all these really, interesting use cases. But the thing about services is that in most cases, it's not this like high repeat item, right? It's not like, oh, every day I'm going to hire a plumber. Every day I'm going to hire a voice trainer, right? Like maybe if you're preparing for something or you have a lot of work going on, that may be the case. But because of that, it's really hard for, for somebody to build a business just to focus on plumbers or just to focus on one vertical, because it's not like this every need that you have. It's not like food. It's not like travel. It's not like these either really large ticket items or really high frequency items. And that's why a lot of these has kind of gotten left behind with, the transition to online. But I guess what we're excited about is that, traditionally a lot of the SMBs and a lot of the freelancers on our platform, before Zechtenwell, they hadn't like gotten new clients online before, right? The majority of their business was getting from other referrals or for other offline channels. And so we found this is actually a great opportunity for a lot of professionals across Japan that maybe were once using fax machines, right? And maybe still using fax machines to say, hey, I have a smartphone now. I use it for personal use. Hey, there's consumers are searching online and looking for me there. Why don't I have a presence online? And I think over the last 10 years, we've seen this transition where, not only do, even the older generations now start to have smartphones, but we're in this situation now where, compared to 10 years ago, I think there's not as much maybe of an allergy to, growing, building an online presence, right? It's not like the internet is out to get you and I just want to be offline. I think everybody, even if we talk to pros that are in more rural areas, they're definitely recognize like, yes, like sooner or later we need to go online, need to figure out this whole social thing, need to figure out this whole internet thing. And the kind of allergy or the kind of, hesitation has gone away. But even still, there hasn't been a good way to just start your business online. There's lots of places that'll charge you a fortune and completely rip you off just to kind of build you a business on, like give you a website online. That's not going to give you any clients. And so we're very focused on just introducing clients because that's the biggest pain point. But obviously we plan to do a lot more over time in terms of helping pros grow their business online. And we think that Corona, if anything, is a great catalyst for our space, basically for the industry to start to come online in terms of the actual matching and getting jobs done. But I also think for Japan overall, this is a really great, don't get me wrong, like I don't want to be taken out of context, right? There's a lot of like real challenges and there's a lot of suffering and struggling that's going on right now and a lot of kind of sacrifices being made as well. But the way that I look at it is that always on the flip side of adversity is opportunity, right? And I think that there's also a lot of opportunity for Japan overall to come out of this much stronger, much better. And especially for entrepreneurs, right, and people who can move fast and who can adapt, there is, more game-changing kind of scenarios than ever before. And I think how you move during kind of this year and next year can really determine how your company can separate itself from others, how you can establish your brand, what services you can provide. And so I think the everybody recognizes, everyone's talking about like after Corona. I don't think it's just going to be like a clean after Corona before Corona. But there's definitely a lot of consumer behavior that's changing. There's a lot of good excuses for people to start coming online and doing new businesses. And so yeah, I'm overall pretty excited about what the future holds.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I hope that a lot of people can feel the same way too.
Hmm.
And I know that you mentioned that you're focusing on like helping professionals like meet their clients,
Yeah.
but like, would you recommend, there are a lot of people right now that are kind of trying to join and, maybe turn a side gig into a full-time career. Do you have
Mm-hmm.
any advice or insight into that during these times?
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing that you can do is really just figure out how you can provide a service that your consumers will like. So whatever, like if you're doing catering or if you're doing guitar lessons, whatever it may be, that you're interested in, that you're providing as a if you're doing it on a gig base or if you're doing it on a recurring base, whatever it may be, just figure out in the world of Corona, listen to your customers and understand like what is it that they need. And if you can provide something that's valuable, and so in the case of Corona, maybe it's just saying, hey, yes, we offer catering services and we have, thermometer checks and everybody wears masks and we take these measures and we take all these, we do all these best practices so that the end user can feel safe, right? I think in China, it was the extreme where you saw people like, the platforms would have like real-time thermometer, like temperature checks of the people coming to deliver your food and whatnot, right? I mean, I think, I haven't seen that extreme in most Western countries or in Japan, but I think really just thinking that in this world with Corona, like Japan does an amazing job in services in general when it comes to omotenashi or anything else like that, and providing a high quality service. But just understanding like what actually needs to be done, and if that is something that has to be done in person, and you're offering like start offering shucho services like where you go to them, so it's not a crowded place, and you take all these kind of the best practices around making sure that Corona isn't an issue or a concern, or if it's starting to offer your services online. Maybe you're doing some repair services and say, hey, instead of me going to visit you and spending all this time and energy on both of our fronts, why don't you give me a video tour at first, right? And I can show you and point out exactly what you need, and then we can order it and we can kind of get things done smoothly and quickly. So I think it's just really understanding how to adapt to what the world is becoming and what consumers are looking for. And the best way to do it is kind of by talking to people and in your fields and the end users. And then if you already feel that you have something that you're providing that is like a good experience that people want, then, and your only question is, okay, how do I grow my user base? Then it just comes down to how you market yourself, right? And that's what platforms like Zechtem are for. That's what you have other different kind of lead generation platforms, or depending on your industry or what you want to be doing. I mean, oftentimes advertising on Facebook or Google or other places can be expensive, but there's definitely a lot of different channels depending on your industry for you to grow that. And then it comes down to understanding your business as a business, right? And thinking about if you're going to be living and eating off of this full time, what are your unit economics need to look like? How much does it cost to acquire a user, right? And how much money are you going to make from that user? And what's your cost of servicing them, right? So if you're going to make, if it costs you 5,000 yen to acquire a new student, and they continue with you on average, 5 times, for example, and you can charge them 10,000 yen each time or something, and then you make 50,000 yen. You can say, okay, spend 5,000 yen, I can make 45,000 yen surplus, and then for the other fees of everything I cover, my take home is 20,000 yen. If that's the case, in order to live, maybe I need to have 20 of those clients each month, right? And so you can kind of start to do the math, and you can start to see, depending on the lifestyle that you want to live, and depending on kind of acquisition costs. I think one of the biggest challenges that a lot of people have who've figured out a good service is they don't know how to scale that, and they don't know how to grow their client base. And I think there's also maybe a little bit of pride or ego associated with, hey, like I shouldn't like paying to acquire a new customer. Like that seems silly, right? I'm just amazing. People should come to me and find me, or I should have word of mouth and referrals. And if you're able to do that, that's great. But the reality is the vast majority of the market, that's not how it works. Is that even if you're providing something that's amazing, you need to find a way to reach people. And so if you can create a great referral scheme, that's one great method that you can use. If you can do some PR, that's another great method. But generally very targeted direct advertising or marketing to people is, a surefire way to reach people, right? And then when you reach people, you can start to say, hey, are they going to take my service or not, right? If not, why not? Where do they fall off in the funnel? And yeah, I think there's a lot of other reading that can be done on, like whether it be digital marketing acquisitions or kind of, how you look at unit economics in your own business. But if the yen adds up, right? If you can spend 10 yen to make 11 yen and you can do that all day long, then, you should do that. Or if your time is going to be the finite factor, then you figure, okay, hey, if I can have more business than I can handle, and that's my limiting factor, do I hire other people to work with me as part of a team and build it out as more of a small business?
No, that's a really great way to figure out how to price like when you're starting up. I think one of the questions that we had from Dana was that she wondered how to start with the pricing. So I understand like what you just explained, but what
Hmm.
if you're someone who doesn't really have any professional experience, but you've been providing a service of some sort to family and friends?
Yeah,
Do you have any advice to kind of start that off? It's a little bit awkward in the beginning, right?
it can be, but I'd say like you don't want to price yourself too low and then be seen as a kind of low end service. So I think it depends on, I would do some market research based on what type of service it is that you're trying to provide, right? What is the range for, the top, right? Or it is like large companies, even if they're not the best. And then somebody who's doing an amateur. And then I would understand, if you've been providing for friends and family, like, would you consider yourself like an amateur? That's trying to go pro, or are you actually someone that has like are able to provide at the same pro level? You have the qualifications or whatever might be needed to do it at that level. If that's the case, then yeah, depending on. Or can I ask do you know what the service is in Dana's case? Um,
For Dana, I don't think she had anything specific in mind.
yeah,
It was just a general question
sure.
for people that are interested to kind of get started.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I ask because I'm speaking in like very general terms because
Yeah.
things vary a lot depending on the actual service. But for example, if it's a service that would repeat, then maybe what you can do is you can say, hey, okay, maybe a really top trainer is going to charge 10,000 yen an hour, but like amateurs maybe get 3,000 yen an hour. I think okay, I'd be happy if like I guess maybe another way to phrase it is what would you like? What do you need to make for it to work out? Right? If it's not at least that, then it's a problem, right? You're not going to be able to scale that. And so if it needs to be 6,000 yen or 7,000 yen, or you want it to be 7,000 yen or 8,000 yen, then I would first try to figure out, is that going to be possible, right? And if you can do that, then that's the best. And the only way to know that is to an extent is to try, right? Is to ask you to try to provide your service. But it's much easier to start with a higher price and go down than the other way around.
Mm.
Um, and if it's something that's going to be a repeat service, like a lesson, then maybe you offer a lot. What a lot of people do is they offer a trial lesson, right? Either at a discounted or even sometimes free price, right? So if you're really desperate, just like hey, get feedback on your service and whatnot, then you can offer trial lessons. But yeah, you don't want to undersell yourself if you're coming off as a professional. But you also don't want to be seen as kind of like abusing the market prices and yeah, if you want long-time loyal customers.
Yeah, that's true. And what would you say is kind of like the ratio of professionals that are already, have been running their own business for some time and people that may be, getting onto the platform for the first time? It might be the first time actually selling their service professionally.
Mm, mm, mm. So for the most case, for us, since right now we really cater to professionals who already have a business like running it, even if it's them as a freelancer,
Mm.
it's mostly people who have already sold their service before for money, but they haven't sold their service for money before online. And so we're helping them transition that business online. So if you imagine the yellow pages before, right, town page in Japan, right, all the millions of entries there, right, you can't necessarily find them in their ratings and everything else like that online. And so those are a lot of our targets, but we also do have, tens of thousands of freelancers on our platform that, many of them have been doing freelancing before. Some of them only in a part-time capacity, some of them in a full-time capacity. And so for people who are starting off in a part-time capacity and saying, hey, I want to make this my full-time gig, right? For whatever reason, because of Corona or whatnot, then ideally you'll already have had some experience selling your service for money before. So you already kind of have an idea of this is how I can provide my service. So it's just a matter of the unit economics to scale. Going back to the previous conversation, how much money is it going to cost me to acquire a customer, and how much money can I make from that customer? And if those numbers are good, then I can start growing my business, adding on clients, getting more reviews, earning more trust, getting more referrals from those people, getting more repeat business from those same people. And yeah, I think that becomes like the purpose of HTML for marketing channels. And going back to like, if you're trying to sell something for the first time, then yeah, that's like hard. You're building your business from the very beginning. And I think, HTML isn't as well catered to that right now, because we're mostly kind of tailored to the real, like, people doing this as a professional for a living market. But yeah, I mean, we do have people who start off as amateurs, offer a lower price, but it's more expensive. Like, if you're going to be offering something for a cheaper price, that doesn't mean that it's cheaper to acquire your clients, right? And so at the end of the day, it comes down to what are consumers looking for. And if they're looking for something that maybe the difference between an amateur and professional is not so big, or if they're just looking for like an entry level, class, or an entry level kind of suggestion on how to do something, that's wonderful. But for example, photography is a great example, right? You have people that will do the exact same job for 2,000 yen, 20,000 yen, or 200,000 yen, right? Depending on who the photographer is, right? Maybe it's an amateur and saying, hey, I'm just getting started. Sure, great. Like, I'll take my material. I'm just looking for experience, looking to build up my portfolio, and we'll go for cost. And then you'll have people who are maybe semi-professional say, okay, hey, yeah, that's like a proper job, a proper gig. 20,000 yen is appropriate for a couple hours work, and they'll go and do that. And then you'll have people who are like top of their game, creatives. But if you're depending on the budget of what you're looking to do, if it's a corporate item that you're going to have a multi-million-dollar ad budget around afterwards, then yeah, you want to maybe make sure that the picture is that much nicer, right? Or you have that much more of a creative element in it. Or if it's your wedding photos, right? Maybe you want to spend that much more for something that's nicer. And so I think it just comes down to understanding, like, if you're going to be offering amateur wedding photos, maybe there's not such a big market for that, because maybe people really care about that at that time. But maybe if it's like, hey, your Facebook profile pictures, right, or something like that, and I just want to gather experience, and maybe offering something on a lower end scale. And there are marketplaces specifically for that as well, in some categories. But I think you can then start to find that and kind of explore with how professional your service is, and the feedback that you get directly from your clients.
Okay. And then it seems like, so what you're doing right now is you're helping people kind of bring their service online, which they haven't up until now, correct?
Yes.
So
Well, bring it online and then help basically introduce them to clients. So we have, potential clients are coming to our site every day, and they're looking for these professionals. And so we introduce the professionals that are on our platform.
So do you see any like opportunities for maybe more people to kind of join your website to kind of fulfill a certain service at this time?
Yeah, I mean, we have for a long time in Japan has been a supply constrained market, right? In the sense that there's actually a lot of demand in Japan. Just it's a huge pain, right? If you want to hire a plumber, you want to hire someone to do something, like, it's like, how do you do it? You like go and you like search and you call places one by one. You ask for, some more, then they come by and they give you a quote. It's like a huge project. And so we're trying to make it easier and easier for people to actually make those requests and get their jobs done. And I think with that, we're actually seeing that in our platform and other similar platforms, there's a tremendous amount of demand. And so I think if you're able to provide a service, if you look at, again, this was Japan's problem, is that, aging labor force, right? There's not enough supply to meet all the, demand. Depending on how you look at it, yes, demand is being met by supply. But in an actual more liquid marketplace where you look at, how much potential demand there is, if there was good supply to fulfill it, then yeah, I mean, every day we have hundreds of requests that maybe they're looking for another type of professional, or if there were more options there, they can make a better informed decision. And so yeah, definitely, it's just, I mean, I think there's almost any service there is, there are clients to be made, unless it's something very, very niche.
Okay. And I mean, well, we just got the notice, right, that we can, like, stores are opening
Yeah.
up, restaurants, like, so What are your thoughts on like the changes to the gig economy kind of going forward post-corona?
Yeah. Well, I think that overall, like the economy has been very challenging for a lot of people in it as well. Is that, unlike permanent work, you don't have the same type of insurance, right? And so, maybe if you were just doing one-off jobs as a photographer, for example, and then all of a sudden nobody's holding events anymore, then there goes your income stream, right? And so it's actually been really hard. And if you look at small businesses, we just had the tax hike, right? 6 months ago, and people were kind of getting crunched by that, squeezed by that. And now on top of that, demand across the street in most verticals went down, right? In most areas, you found that people, okay, we're not having an event, and so we're not hiring, services for the event, or whatever it may have been. And so it's been a really hard time for professionals, not only in Japan but across the world. And so I think that there's some things that'll probably change the way that we work and that we live, hopefully, over whether it takes 10, 20 years or however long it takes, in terms of securities for working as a freelancer or working as as a gig worker. Um, but in terms of what can actually be done right now, I think that people who are ambitious and hungry and aggressive, there is a tremendous amount of work out there, and there are all sorts of kind of industries where demand is booming incredibly, right? And that's largely online industries, right? Because consumers are now stuck in front, at home, remote, and trying to figure out how to do things online. And so I think that, there's, in terms of what's going to change with Corona, obviously, yeah, like more things being able to be done remote, more different types of kind of balance between the way that we live and the way that we work. Hopefully more Japanese, guys will actually get involved with their family and learn how to kind of contribute to society more than just as the traditional salaryman. Um, but yeah, I think that it's there's also a lot of real challenges when it comes down to the legal structures of, hey, if you're not a permanent employee, you don't have the same type of insurances, and loneliness and depression has long been a challenge before Corona, and I think that things like that are only kind of getting worse right now. And so yeah, I don't know if I have an amazing kind of answer in terms of like, hey, like this is like, the world's all going to be great. I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity, but there is also a lot of real challenges in this space. And so I don't think it's something to do lighthearted, to say is like, oh, I'm just going to throw away my job and start something and like figure out how to do this whole freelance thing. I don't think it's actually, the space is as mature as we'd like it to be. And so that's what we're working to make it as mature as possible. So there's more transparency. You can say, hey, if I want to start learning some skills, here's where there's a lot of demand. Why don't I learn these skills and then start making money for it? I think that's the kind of economy that we're moving towards. But yeah, I mean, there's talks about like, guilds restarting, right? You go back to, people becoming specialties, in whatever their profession may be, and then, earning business and earning, jobs that way. It may be, but yeah, these are all things that are probably going to evolve over time.
Yeah, no. And then like, I mean, I'm just curious, like, how has the coronavirus like personally affected you and like you as a business owner as well?
Yeah. Yeah, it's been hard. I mean, I have two kids, two daughters, and they're still young. And so without them going to, preschool, all of a sudden it was trying to figure out how to balance like doing work from my bedroom and being in meetings all day while not destroying my posture, while still trying to balance out. My wife is also working remotely and kind of taking care of the kids. And yeah, it hasn't been easy. The opposite side is that it's, I think, fortunately as a tech company, all of our our platform and everything is completely online, right? So all of our employees, as long as they have an internet connection, they're able to do their work. And we already have kind of a certain amount of trust and relationship that was built up when we were working together in person to kind of get through this period. All right, but it's I mean, we were looking at our neighbors in the same building, and like people moved in during the Corona period. I heard, I think it was 60% of people in Japan were continuing to go to the office during this period. And so when you look at this, this emergency declaration and what we experienced, I mean, I think it's a lot of the foreign companies, a lot of the tech companies that were really online, but a lot of places actually didn't change. That said, it was still definitely like a very big kind of impactful shift for Japan. I think there's definitely a lot of parts that we're seeing as well where consumer sentiment is changing, as you're starting to talk about, whether it be going online, whether it be, how do we address depression or loneliness. But personally, I think my posture took the biggest toll, and um, And yeah, I've long been more kind of like someone who's happy just kind of like staying inside in front of a computer and doing things. But I was very worried about how the company was going to be able to to perform during this period, because we had never been through such an extended remote period before. And our engineering team, even before the emergency declaration, was mostly remote, and that worked pretty smoothly. But that's a little bit more easy to understand, right, with the engineering team. What I was most worried about is that our sales team was growing quite quickly, and so in May we had 3 new members join our sales team, right in the middle of the emergency declaration. And so people were going to be joining remotely, right? We're still building out our organization. We don't have like an incredibly strong foundation in place. How are they going to learn how to do their job, be able to perform, do all these different types of things remotely? Like, is this going to work? Sales is really a function of motivation, right? How much coffee have you had that morning, right? Like, how much competition is there around you, right? Make those calls and talk to people. But I was probably one of the happiest things was that it seems that I was worried for no reason, and that the sales had their best months, right? The last couple of months, they continued, and I think it was also partially just because, you know, people have, people join a startup or work on something because that's what they're passionate about, or that's what they want to do. And so I think that, maybe in larger companies, you have different types of challenges, right? People slacking on different amounts. But at the end of the day, if you're going to be stuck at home, you may as well be doing something you want to be doing. And so if you're going to be working at a company that you enjoy or working towards a mission, like I think everybody was able to really kind of rally behind our, what needed to be done, and do an amazing job. And so, yeah, I mean, we're just talking about how we go back to the office right now. It's not 100% clear. And I think you see, people taking all sorts of extremes between closing offices altogether to save money, right? To actually having bigger offices, right? So there's more spacing between people, right? And I think for us right now, we're kind of, you know, the most important thing is that, employees are able to feel safe and comfortable, and they're able to be in a position where they're able to perform. And so, we've, from probably next week or so, it's going to be more of a situation where, hey, anybody who's comfortable is welcome to come back to the office. But a little bit of a still kind of wait and see, as before we make any kind of clear decisions around, okay, we're all going to be back at the office, or we're all going to go remote. I don't think that'll happen. Or it'll be some kind of combination of, certain days or certain weeks where we're all there physically. I think there's a lot of different ways that it can line up. But yeah, I was really encouraged by everybody's performance working remotely. And I think that for the benefit of Japan, I think a lot of the larger companies who finally got their act together to say, hey, like our BCP plan can now be, working remotely instead of having the secondary site, how their employees were able to perform remotely. And so that's, I think, that to me was one of the most encouraging signs. And when you think about, like, if a large company having everybody work remotely and what needs for that to happen, if schools are canceled and they have to take care of kids during the day, the company also has to understand that, right? If there, people also have to understand that. And so, like, people recognizing, hey, this is the work that needs to get done, right? And how do we achieve that within our schedule and within our day? And if that means that, hey, in the the morning I'm actually spending time with my kids, or in the afternoon I'm doing these things and having some family time or whatever, and I'm working later in the evening after bedtime and doing these things between 8 and 12, right? I think everybody performs differently within their own kind of circumstances. And so this forced kind of construct of, okay, we work from 9 to 6 or whatever it is, I don't think that like, I think that concept and that notion of that Japan's been so kind of heavily rooted in, and like the salaryman life cycle, I think that this is like hopefully a big kind of crack in that, in a good way. And I think that hopefully more and more people are going to be able to work in environments that they can enjoy and they can feel supported, to both spend the quality time with their family, but also to kind of work to get the work done in a meaningful way. And I think finding that balance is has been very hard for Japan in the past. I think it's been very hard. And I think one of the great things about Startup Lady is that it's been particularly hard for women in Japan, right? I've long been a believer that I think for women are actually best placed in Japan to actually like start or join a startup, just because the social expectations in a large company are just so out of control that, and it's not everywhere. That's a generalized statement, but that yeah, like being able to work in a way that is actually more correlated with performance and output and stuff like that, I think this is hopefully a very good catalyst for continued change in that direction.
Yeah, and it looks like we have a question from Facebook from Katrina Hovland.
Okay.
She's asking if how do we encourage community and collaboration remotely?
Ah, um, yeah, great question. So thanks, Katrina. I think it depends on what you're trying to collaborate on, and how you can have. I think one of the biggest things that people are missing, not being in the office physically, is that sense of community, right? Where you can kind of get to know each other, you can overhear things, and you can kind of understand, the company's culture and identity. Like, how does that, like, how do you establish that when everybody's remote? And I think there's all sorts of online productivity tools for collaboration. Shared whiteboard spaces. We're doing this over Zoom, or I guess we're live streaming this as well. But you can't always replicate just being in the same room and having a whiteboard, but you can get pretty close, right? To having a live video stream chat and having a shared whiteboard and you're drawing things. I think the upcoming developments and AR and VR rather, you can kind of be in the same virtual meeting room, and I think those things will continue to develop. But I think the harder question is more around community, and I think this is something that's been challenging even before Corona, is I think this sense of community and the identity that people have. And I think people have had a large sense of identity with their own kind of work when they're working as a salaryman. But, with your community, with your building, right? Like, how many of your neighbors do you know and you enjoy and you spend, like, I think it's very, that sense of community in Japan, I think has long been a challenge. Um, and I think that, one of the, less large communities that people were part of, which was their peers at work, is now also kind of being threatened by this. And I think, people, we try to make up for it with, online nomikai, right? Online drinking, online kind of informal sessions. I think you have to increase the kind of communication for things that aren't important, right? So you can have the communication around the important things that need to be whiteboarded or your milestones or whatever projects you're working on. But like, how do you prioritize time that's just spent for, just chilling and chatting and kind of getting to know each other, and talking about things that aren't just purely related to work. And I think that that's the harder one. And I think the companies that have been able to successfully implement remote, and this is actually what a lot of remote experts were warning when Corona was first coming out, was saying that remote isn't as simple as just a policy where everybody starts working remotely. It's actually just the whole kind of mindset and everything to support that, and the culture that you have support that. And if it's not done right, it can make it very hard for people to perform, to come back to work, or to be able to kind of really do things in the right way. And so I think that is definitely a challenge, and I think that business leaders, and people in those communities as well, all just kind of need to be consciously thinking about that, and recognize that community is really uh, taking a what's the word for it? It's not benefiting from the situation. So, so I think just either proactively kind of creating that time and working around that is the best workaround. But there's nothing like being in person and hugging and talking and other things like that.
We also have a question from Aki. She's wondering, how did you get into your industry and why did you choose it for your business?
Mm. So Zayton, so I've been in Japan for over 12 years now, I guess. And I love Japan, right? Everybody who's on this who's probably speaking English is, who's a foreigner, is also probably here for some of the similar reasons that I am, which is that Japan's an awesome place to be, right? You have the best food in the world. When people go on the trains, they run on time, things are clean, things are, safe. It's great being here. And I guess I worked, my background is more of an engineer. And so I've always been about trying to solve problems. And I worked in finance for several years, problem solving in those spaces and rebuilding parts of businesses. But for me, it was when my first daughter was born that I decided to take time off. And I realized that it was actually, even though as a salary man, things were great and things were on time every day and the sushi tasted great every day. For my wife, like the expectations, what was needed for her. And it's like how everything was this huge project, whether it be from like moving to kind of changing something in our home to making our baby our kids room. All of these things were just really large projects, and this was like really inefficient. And so the engineer in me is very lazy, right? And I think engineers, I joke, it's like you work very hard so you can be lazy, right? Um, and wanting to kind of automate things. And at first I looked at this from a consumer perspective, saying, "Is like, hey, like, why can't I just, I can buy goods online? How come I can't order services so easily, right? How come the market is this fragmented and there's no effective price?" And I was working in markets, and so you want to be able to liquidity and the transparency with the pricing and kind of know what's fair. You just want to be able to make a good informed decision without having to take a lot of time and be inefficient. And so first look at this from more of a consumer perspective, but over time we realized that the big challenge here in Japan was these professionals who are really, really talented at what they do, and aren't always great at marketing themselves and growing their business. And we realized that that was actually, as I was saying before, like Japan being more of a supply constraint market, that was really what we had to solve for. We had to solve for how we can bring the professionals online. And so you could say I got into it by saying I want to be lazy. I want to solve this whole services experience. I want to build the Amazon for services, because the Amazon for goods is all right. But really realizing the Japan that I want to continue to live in, the Japan that I want my kids to grow up in. If my kids decide to work in Japan, a Japan that they could feel comfortable working in, where they have the right type of opportunities. And so that was really kind of my motivation, and kind of passion for building out this platform, which is really, we are still very much at the very beginning of our journey, right? It's been a few years. We've grown a lot over the last few years, but we still have everything to solve for in this space. It's one of the largest consumer sectors yet to come online. It's as big as food. And yet it's just, everything's happening offline right now. And so that's, to me, just the largest problem that I can solve. I think adds value in this market in Japan, for people living here and for people working here. And so that's why, hopefully people who, going back to your question earlier, Coco, around like, starting off part-time, or how do I kind of, build up that discipline, hopefully down the line, we can have all that, right? We can have the, the trainings. We can say, hey, this is where there's surplus demand in the market. How can we have, this is how much you could earn doing these different types of jobs. We can have, this HTML, university to everything that's needed to kind of, propel your career, whether, Japan is working in guilds or has different types of, employment benefits for, for freelancers or any other different kind of construct. But I think the only thing that's clear right now is that it's incredibly fragmented. It's incredibly inefficient. It's incredibly offline right now. And so it's a great chance to, for businesses to come online and grow because there is demand. And for people who want to do what they're passionate about. I think for anybody, like, the way that we live and work in 20 years from now is going to be so much different than we're imagining right now. I think our education system and everything is like, fundamentally flawed, like not readying us for what that world is going to look like. But I think, at the end of the day, you live once, right? And how can you live your life without regrets? And I think for anybody starting a startup, that was, for us was definitely the case, was, hey, loved my previous job, thought I was going to be there forever. But this opportunity, like, to me, looking back on this, if I can grow old, I would definitely regret not being able to solve this for Japan, in the Japan that I want to live in. And I think if you're going to be doing, growing your own company or starting to work as a freelancer, at the end of the day, I think that's what you really need to be, answering, is if you're able to have that luxury of choice, how can you, create the environment that you're going to be most motivated in. And if you're motivated, then you're going to be able to create more value, which is more value to society and more value to yourself, and you'll enjoy it that much more. So as opposed to just maybe a job or a gig, think of it as kind of your life's work or your life's calling. And if you can be, in that mentality, and figuring out how to make ends meet, then that's wonderful. And that's the Japan that we want everybody to be able to partake in.
Okay, yeah. And we actually had a question from Sabrina Lau.
Mm-hmm.
She was wondering, like, what are some red flags to watch out for when being offered a gig? So anyone who might want to go from offline to online, what are some red flags that they might want to watch out for?
So again, I guess this is like there's so many different types of gigs. It's kind of hard to say like in a general sense, but if I were to say, like a photography job, right? Or, something that we have is coming on our platform. I think I assume you mean like as a professional, what are the flags to look out for, right? Yeah. So, I mean, I think, at the end of the day, consumers are consumers, right? They're price shopping, or depending on what they're looking for, they're looking for options. Sometimes they're more motivated, sometimes they're less motivated. And so I think, there's, a couple things to really be one, from the business perspective is just, being, smart and proactive and following up and following through and making sure there isn't room for things to go wrong. Right. And I think this is what, more professional or experienced professionals have learned is that, hey, I send a reminder the day before. Hey, I make sure that, I have an agreement, or if it's a large job that I actually get part of the payment in advance, whatever it may be, making sure that from a business side, it's not like, oh yeah, great, sounds good, here's my price, and then you don't respond for a month, right? And then you go there on the day and you're like, you weren't there, what was the problem, right? And so I think, there's some of these things that are just, you learn from experience, you learn from messing them up once, then you build a process around it to make sure that you can more proactively close your business and you can get the business. But in terms of flags, I mean, the other thing, we say red flag, I mean, is safety is what comes to mind. And I think that, you know, usually as a business, if you're going to somebody else's home, right, you want to make sure that, and if you're doing a job, if you're an electrician, if you're a plumber, that's what you're doing every single day, right? And I think that, A, the channel by which it comes from, B, the amount of information that you know about them, right? If you're replying to, an ad in Craigslist and somebody says, hey, I'm looking for, a plumber to come over, and you don't know anything about them. And, it can be, maybe it's just a fine normal job, but maybe you want to, let somebody else know, let a friend or a relative know, hey, I'm going to be going to this address, for this person for this job that I'm aware of. If you don't hear from me in the next couple hours, please call the police, kind of thing. And I think that, ideally in the future, we'd have, full authentication both ways on everybody, and you could know that things are, verified and criminal checks run on everybody. Unfortunately, a lot of the kind of parts of that knowledge chain aren't really, streamlined yet or online. But we take measures, make sure that we can get, core information from the customer. They're interested enough to give us, their name, their phone numbers, their their email addresses and stuff like that, for them to even just be registered, just kind of submit the information. Kind of, can flag people if if suspicious behavior is going on. But at the end of the day, yeah, like if you're the first person going to that consumer, that's yeah, it is like a non-zero risk. And so depending on the type of job, like if it's a photography shoot, maybe you're meeting outdoors, right? Maybe it's going to be in a common space, right? Or if it's a lesson, if you do it in an area where there's other people nearby, then you can know for the first few lessons, hey, this isn't something weird. But there's all sorts of weird people out there, right? Like, and I think and that is something that you should have a healthy level of paranoia around. And yeah, so those are just some of the kind of, like, I don't know, in terms of flags, but just if you're going to be going to someone that you've never met before and you don't have a lot of information about, and you're going to be going into a private space with them, i.e. their home, or somewhere else where there won't be anybody else around, then yeah, just try to get a little bit of extra information about them in advance, or let somebody else know that you can trust, where you're going to go, so that if something really weird happens, that you can kind of report it. And then if something is weird, move sooner than later. And I think it's it's hard to kind of catch on to all those flags sometimes. But I've heard stories in other countries of like housekeepers, for example, being harassed or something like that. And it's hard, right? Like even if you're a house cleaner at a larger company, sending out keepers to other different individuals, yeah, that individual will get flagged, and they would be able to make a request in the system, and maybe they could press legal charges and stuff like that. But it's a really hard, imperfect process, and you're going to be looking out for yourself more than anyone else. And especially as a freelancer, you're going to be looking out for yourself more than anyone else is going to be looking out for you. And so I think just being kind of street smart about that, as much as you can. And I think if you Google, there's other kind of best practices out there for things, but those are the top of mind.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that like one of like your expertise that we've actually have listed on our Startup Lady membership, on which your mentor is like how to strategize a long-term career, because I think that question would be really valuable to a lot of the people out there right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, like, again, I think this is amazing timing for anyone considering to, like, change your job or think about the future. It's a great catalyst in many ways for that, even though it's bringing along, many hardships for many people at the same time. there's a lot of new different types of demand that wasn't there before. There's a lot of kind of new ways of kind of living and working that wasn't considered, normal, a few months back. And so, I think just, given the new normal of where we expect things to be going, for people starting, if you're looking to be starting a company, I think there is so much opportunity right now. I think there's never been a better time to kind of start a company. I think the funding environment is more challenging for sure. But if you're able to do that and you're able to build something that people need, um, it's like large companies aren't going to be able to spin on a dime, right? But as a small business owner, you can move as fast as you decide to. And so I think that's where you have your kind of competitive advantage. And in terms of kind of your longer term career goal, I mean, I think it depends on where you want to get to, right? And especially building a company, you know, largely speaking, there's maybe two different paths, right? There's kind of your, building your kind of sustainable business, right? That maybe you're not going to become a trazillionaire, but you're going to be able to earn a steady income, and you're going to be able to have a kind of healthy balance that you want to take with family and everything else like that. And I think that is like they call it lifestyle business, right? And I think that can be a great thing to go after if that's what your intentions are. And if you want to prioritize other different types of your time, what I found for many people that go after a lifetime business is it's really rare, I think, for people to find like the lifestyle business that lets them live the life as they want to, that also kind of gives them the stimulation that they want. Is that many times people find, hey, I'm good at consulting for this. I'm going to do this consulting part time. I'm going to make the money I need, and I'm going to have all this extra time to travel or spend time with family or whatever it may be. But it can be hard, and I think it's really easy to kind of get lulled into this false sense of security, where you say, hey, okay, I'm able to kind of live, I'm able to support myself, but then not be in a position where you can actually take risk, right? And I think there are many exceptions to that, right? And I think there's many people that, for example, are really passionate about, say, yoga, and they become a yoga teacher, and they can be on a platform, they can grow their business, they can be doing that day in, day out, and that's wonderful. But I think there's also cases where people realize, hey, okay, this is a way I can make ends meet, and then you kind of stop at that point. So I think when it comes down to being a lifestyle business, I would just really, be clear what you're trying to optimize for. And at the end of the day, you need money, you need to live. But you also need to be living. And so just really making sure that if you're going to be able to line up your balance such that you can be living the career that you want with your only one life. And I think the good litmus test is if money wasn't an issue, what would you do, right? What work would drive you, what would encourage you, and what would excite you? And then try to figure out, okay, is there a way that I can make money doing that? Right. And then in terms of more, the non-lifestyle businesses, more of the kind of the startup route, or trying to grow your business and scaling. This is, what I've been trying the last few years. It's not easy. It's going to be much harder than you expect. It's going to take a lot more out of you than you expect. It's going to take a lot more out of everyone around you than you expect. And it's going to be damaging, but it's going to be thrilling at the same time. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to challenge yourself. You're going to push yourself in many different directions. But you really have to be ready to kind of jump off that cliff. And you need to make sure that you have kind of some level of kind of safety nets around you or your family. So whether it be, making sure that, okay, if you have a family, that your family's gonna be able to eat, right? Or you have enough savings to say, okay, even if something happens, like we can live for 6 months, right? While I find a new job or whatever it may be. But if you're able to do that and you're able to have those safety nets, then I think it's an amazing time to start a business. And I mean, I think everybody that you would talk to, that if you ask them about like, hey, would you have started your business sooner or later? Everyone would have said, I wish I jumped off the cliff sooner, right? And this time when a lot of companies are moving into defense mode is the perfect time to go on offense. And 2 years later, looking back at this time, we're going to realize, oh, wow, at that point, if I had done this thing that's really obvious now, 2 years from now, if I had done this 2 years ago, that would have been great. And I think if you're able to kind of pick up on any of those trends or insights and kind of capitalize on those, there's a lot of really wonderful businesses to be built during this period.
Yeah, sounds great. I definitely feel that way, so I feel you. And I guess like I just have one last question for you before we
Yeah.
close up. Is I can't ignore like I love your positive energy, and I would really love to hear more about like how can we be optimistic about the world post corona?
Hmm.
Any advice there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a decision that everybody makes in terms of how you look at the world and how you view the world and how you look at your opportunities. But I think we're living in such a unique time, even before Corona, right? Just the rate at which things are changing. The rate at looking at how we're going to live and be working in 10, 20 years from now. I think Corona has just accelerated that, especially in Japan. So if you were to imagine that, hey, the way that we live, the way that we work, the way that education happens, the way that all these industries happen, these are all going to be changing due to AI and due to automation and due to whatever kind of comes down the funnel from all the innovation. If you consider that all that was going to change, Corona has on one hand been a little bit of a reset, right? I think it's kind of cleaned the platter for a lot of places maybe that weren't ever going to really be sustainable, right? It's a good chance for them to kind of prove that. I think in some cases maybe it has slowed down things, but in other cases it's really accelerated innovation, right? It's accelerated things around health tech, right? How fast we're going to be able to actually get vaccines out, how fast we're going to be able to kind of diagnose things and kind of handle things. If this happened 100 years ago or 50 years ago or even 20 years ago, like how would the world have responded to it versus how we're doing it now? And yeah, like everybody messed up and botched the response except for a few countries, but overall, like we're just evolving so fast as as a population. I've always been excited about what the future holds, right? And I think that Corona is helping us get there faster. And so I really, looking forward to living in the future and helping build the future. And so I think for everybody as well, like, in terms of being optimistic, it's just, a matter of how you look at the future. And I think if the future looks scary, then I think there's a lot of reasons to not be optimistic, right? But if you can see, what you can look forward to in the future, and what you're, how things are going to be, when things are how they are in 10, 20 years from now, which are hard to imagine, perhaps, then I think you can look for all the good in there and all the things that we can look forward to there. Um, and, uh, and yeah, I mean, I think if that's not exciting, I don't know what that is. It's just,
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a really valuable way to see the future. And yeah, I
I,
think that,
yeah, maybe I'll just add one point. I'd say like, especially in Japan. And so I think there's been a lot of innovation, all over the world, but I think especially in Japan, where you have, declining population in the workforce, you have, productivity really low, but you have, the world's third largest economy, right? And kind of really talented people and really great, kind of infrastructure outside of services and many other different things. Um, I think like living here is already so great. And if you can imagine how much better things will be when we can actually make many of these different changes to our work styles and our living styles in kind of 10, 20 years from now. I think that especially in Japan, because there's less kind of, population that's working, there's less competition. And so compared to most other large markets, there's that much less competition to accomplish what you want to do. And so I think that's why it's like the perfect place to do something big. It's that much harder to come in from overseas, right? If somebody is like a competitor is trying to come in from overseas because there's a language barrier, like Apple it's just a very a unique culture in some ways. But if you understand Japan and you're based here, there's that much less competition, and you have all these exciting things on the horizon. Yeah, so I think I'm just I think there's never a better time to do something, do a startup in Japan before Corona, and then Corona is just icing on the cake from that perspective. A lot of very hard things that also happened during this period. I don't mean to be overly flamboyant around that. But,
yeah, I think you shared a lot of valuable points, and it's obvious that this is a great time for people to kind of jump on your platform, maybe really expand their business, get connected to clients, and take the risk. For the people who haven't started yet, there's no day is today like to start. Like if you're gonna start a business, might as well start now.
yeah,
And
I mean,
like, yeah.
YOLO.
Exactly. So yeah, thank you for being with us today, Jordan. I hope that our viewers enjoyed it, enjoyed our live. And yeah, so we will be having another live session with Frith Maya, who's also one of our mentors. And we will be doing a session talking about this. It's actually going to be really interesting because we're going to do like 3 generations of mentors and mentees to talk about the importance of mentorship, how to mentor, as well as how to be mentored.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as Frith actually shared with us, she mentioned like mentorship is a karmic cycle. I do believe in that. And we'll actually be streaming this live on Sunday, June 14th at 12:30 JST. So, well, Jordan, hopefully you'll join us too. I mean, you are one of our mentors. It would be really, really great. And for all our viewers, we also have Startup Lady Night. It will be our first online one, and it will be on June 18th with JB, who is an agile coach and CEO at Yamaneko, sharing with us how to build happy teams. So I guess Jordan seems to be doing good there, but yeah, make sure to RSVP and join us. And yeah, I hope everyone that joined us this evening enjoyed this. Please join our Facebook community and share with any like-minded startup ladies or anyone who is interested in starting up. And yeah, please support us. We have like a little donation page, so please help us. And we're also trying to survive at this time. So please do. And we also have a membership, and Jordan is one of our mentors. So if you want to hear more, please join. And yeah, thank you so much for being with us once again. And stay tuned and join us for the next one.